Hey friends, this is Joseph Manor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to follow up my last video where we were talking about ego, and I mentioned there's individual ego and there's collective ego. And when you get to a stage yellow perspective, which I hope to emphasize in this video, and my accompanying extended stage coral, which is an octave above yellow from a masculine perspective, I'll unpack all this terminology in the very first part of this video so that we're all on the same page. Just like in my last video, I did the same thing with stage yellow and stage teal, that back and forth. Teal was an extended spiral stage. So coral is also an extended spiral stage, but this time it's masculine, whereas teal is feminine. So first of all, what is this masculine feminine thing? Well, there's two terms that I use. One is the masculine feminine, the other is octave. So what masculine feminine means is that when you go from one spiral stage to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, you go back and forth between masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine. Because development work works through integration. And that integration can be modeled in the schema of masculine, feminine. Hegel was onto this too when he talked about thesis, antithesis. Right? Like you build a castle, somebody else like undermines the foundation of it, then you build again, but this time you build smarter so that can't happen again, right? So it's this evolution of, we might call it maturity in the dream. And there's actually a lot of a tendency to think that what's going on in reality is always improving, but that's not always the case either. See, this utopian vision that everything is always improving. Yeah, from a very macro perspective, you might say that from a certain perspective, things are always improving. Like, you can't really deny that from the perspective of human beings, from like a stage green perspective, that life for human beings, generally speaking, is an upward graph. Almost nobody would disagree with that. Life has gotten better for human beings as a function of time, right? But that's just one perspective. And actually, it depends on what the perspective is to say whether something has gotten better or gotten worse. I mean, you may say pollution on the planet has gotten, if you take that graph, that shows the improvement for human beings, and you invert that, that would be the graph showing the amount of pollution on the planet as a function of time. So whether something is good, bad, right, wrong, really is a function of a particular perspective. And this is what stage yellow understands. So now, what is this stage yellow, stage green, this kind of thing, stage coral? It's a model called spiral dynamics, which is an adult development model that was put forward by Beck and Cohen. And there's a book called Spiral Dynamics that you can buy, and it goes all the way, it goes from stage beige to stage turquoise. It's a pretty good model. I mean, in terms of what you can get out of that book. I recommend you all read that book. And I've devoted a lot of my work over the last God knows how many years working with that model, chewing on that model, and developing even more extended stages that, work for me, kind of just as artworks. It's like somebody, deciding that they want to create anything, right? That's what I decided to create. And so I share that. But understood, right, it's just my, tacking on to their model. Like I'm riffing off of their model, basically, and building an extension to it. Just like progressive rock musicians built on top of rock, if that makes sense. So I look at it as creation. I'm beyond truth. I'm beyond love even. Like I'm at the point now where I'm in just pure creation. So, of course, I cycle back into those too. I mean, you're never not any one of those things, right? But where your ego is pointing does indeed change. So, you can be very focused on one of these spiral stages. So, for example, you could be very focused on stage blue, or very focused on stage green, or very focused on stage yellow even. Lately, I've been focused on yellow because I feel like a lot of people don't really acknowledge yellow. Like if orange is this is what works and that's the good at yellow is why does what work. See, yellow sees that everything that works, it sees the why behind everything that works. Everything that happens in the dream or in human life. Okay, so I'm speaking now higher, like from like more of a spiritual enlightenment perspective when I say in the dream, because spiritual enlightenment likes to draw a bright line between the human and the not human, which falls away too. But I'm kind of, you see, you're speaking different languages to people who are at different stages of development. This is something that stage yellow understands. In every stage after stage yellow, is that first you have to identify what level of maturity somebody is at. And then you're not always going to do this either, because you're going to be arrogant. You're going to be like, I'm just going to speak my language. I don't care, But as you become more loving, you may learn that it's not just about what I want to say. It's communicating with you. So like if you're at stage red, I'm not going to talk to you like you're at stage yellow. You're going to think I'm a lunatic. Right? If you're stage green, I'm not going to talk to you like I'm at stage blue. You're going to hate my guts. If you're at stage green, I'm not going to talk to you like you're at stage yellow. You're going to lose your shit, because you're going to realize that your whole mentality is based around a level of selfishness that you don't even realize. And I'll explain it this way. If we generally speak, I'll give you guys a really concrete example here, just so that you can see that this model actually, it has feet to it. It's not just airy-fairy, like it lands. That's the reason why I love it, because all these spiral stages actually land. So and I'll give you this example. There's a funny idea that liberals eat their own and conservatives fall in line. Well, I can argue that actually this makes total sense if you take a stage yellow perspective. And the stage yellow is the first spiral wizard stage. So it's the first stage that can actually see the ego of the stages underneath it and see its own ego and understand how ego works systemically. So in my last video, it was very stage yellow video. Like, watch that, basically what you have is complex adaptive systems and networks of relations that are all interacting and trying to survive. But there's also more to it than that too. There's the network itself and being the network itself, which you'll move into turquoise, which goes beyond yellow. So yellow isn't the final stage. Be careful of thinking that you found the final set of values or the final stage. Each of these stages is like speaking a different language. So I'm speaking the yellow language in this video. This is the thing I think a lot of people probably don't understand, just because they think that there's one right language. Like most tier 1 people, so this is like stage green on down the spiral. So this would be beige, purple, red, blue, orange, green. All these people think that there's only one truth. There's only one right and wrong. There's only one answer. They don't have a paradoxical mind. They don't really have self-awareness with a capital S. They don't really acknowledge their own ego or other egos accurately. And so you just got to know that when you're dealing with these people. So stage yellow, ideally, would speak these people's language in terms of their values and beliefs even when interacting with them. But that's not always the case. No ego operates that way. You'd have to be like this totally, that'd have to be all you did is practice doing that all day long to become that good at doing that. Maybe some kind of a counselor, right? I could see, like somebody whose job it was, like a negotiator, right? Like a politician even, like a really honest politician that's just trying to be able to communicate with everybody in a way that like you're communicating with them. You're not just talking at them, you're talking with them, right? Like a very diplomatic type of person. And this is why we fight with each other so much, is because we're not speaking each other's language. And all the tier 1 spiral stages are going to take offense to all the tier 2 spiral stages. They're just going to think there's something morally wrong with them. So for example, if you're operating at stage yellow, stage green is going to hate you. If you're operating at stage green, stage blue is going to think you're wacko-loon, right? If you're operating at stage blue, stage green is going to look down on you, because literally stage blue is down, right? A spiral stage from stage green. So getting back to this, let's get back to this sort of political thing because it grounds it. So conservatives fall in line, liberals eat their own. Why does this happen? Well, I want to make the argument, if you watch my last few videos, that conservative and liberal aren't really the province of ethics in the first place. This is something that I think needs to be said. In other words, not the province of love, because ethics has to do with love and care, or the lack thereof. Whereas beauty has to do with creation, right? So conservative and liberal have as much to do with creation or beauty or aesthetics as they do with ethics, morality, love. But what I want to do in this video is I want to focus on conservative and liberal as an aspect of love or morality, because this is what stages blue and green are all about. And this will explain why we have this dynamic between, the right-wingers and the left-wingers. It has to do with collective ego and how individual ego relates with collective ego. But then I think what we can do is we can look at stage orange, stage yellow, and stage coral. So coral this time is my extended spiral stage, an octave above yellow. So what does an octave above mean? An octave above means it's the next masculine or feminine stage up or down, respectively. So for example, orange is an octave above red from a masculine perspective. Green is an octave above blue from a feminine perspective. You guys see how I'm using that? Like if I say an octave below, I would say blue is an octave below green, or red is an octave below orange. All right. So with that said, I'm almost halfway through my video. What I want to do is I want to come back and I want to talk about individual ego, collective ego, conservative and liberal from a love standpoint. Kind of put a pin in the aesthetic standpoint for now, which I talked about in my last few videos, like, protecting protect gardens you tend, fortresses you guard, and how that's an issue of aesthetics. So that's something that I've already basically previewed a lot of this stuff. Why liberal and conservative has just as much to do with aesthetics as it does with ethics. So I'm going to take a break. I'll come back. We'll do part 2 of the video. Just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So let's talk about, first of all, why conservatives fall in line. Well, if you look at Stage Blue is all about right and wrong, true and false. Stage Blue has a very rigid distinction between these. And even in the case of Christianity, a belief in retribution and in punishment, conservatives are actually all about discipline and punishment, right? This is one of the differences between the utilitarianism and retribution theory when it comes to punishment in criminal law. Conservatives are much more inclined to think that a criminal should be punished. He should be literally punished for what as a form of retribution by society. Right? The people punish somebody as retribution. That's a component of it for the harm that that person did to society. Whereas Stage Green would say, no, the person is punished to set an example for the greater good. So this is where we get into utilitarianism. We punish somebody to set an example so that everybody can grow from it or learn from it. You see the influence of Stage Orange on Stage Green, right? Because Stage Orange comes before Stage Green. There's this myth out there that college students and college professors are at Stage Green, and this is actually not really true. I would say they're more at Stage Blue. So Stage Green actually requires that you go through Stage Orange. You don't get to Stage Green until you go through Stage Orange, all right? Which is a masculine stage. And Stage Orange is all about developing your individual ego, learning how to survive on your own, learning how to set morals aside and focus on what's legal instead of necessarily what's moral. So this means that you get outside of your church and state. All right, very much kind of what the American Constitution was all about. You know, like it's the law that sets the upper limit, not the church and not the state. It's the rule of law that everybody adheres to. And outside of what the law governs, you're free to do whatever you want. That's very Stage Orange. A lot of people tend to think that the founding fathers were Stage Blue. Well, no, that's actually what they were reacting against, was Stage Blue. Britain. Right. So yes, they were religious, but they definitely were not Stage Blue. Not all of them. I mean, obviously Orange carries over from Blue. Orange is the next higher stage from Blue. So you don't get to Orange until you've integrated Blue. But you don't get to Green until you've integrated Orange. So don't fool yourself and think that just because some left-winger is shooting off at the mouth that they're Stage Green. They're just another Stage Blue system that's going up against what the conservatives are doing. And this is why liberals and conservatives are actually fighting with each other. Because they're actually both coming from this truth first, right and wrong perspective. Now, you may say to yourself, well, no, Stage Green is definitely focused on right and wrong. I'll agree with you there. I'll also agree with you that Stage Green isn't always conscious of its own ego. And you can see this in why progressives, who are most of the college-educated people, are progressive. I didn't even realize this, but most PhDs are actually progressive. or liberal. Liberal is a weird word because it could mean a variety of different things. Like you could literally be a conservative and be a liberal, like if you understand political theory. So I'm just going to use, God, I hate to use liberal and conservative, but because it's so ingrained, I guess I'm just going to have to stick with that for now. Because now we want to make a distinction between liberal and progressive, which wasn't made in the past. You know, it was just liberals, right? Damn liberals. But let's just continue on with the language. You guys see the nuance, though. Why do liberals... Okay, so why do conservatives fall in line? Because, first of all, it's a group ethic. Stage Blue is a feminine stage. It's about community. It's about the relation. So everything has to do with keeping communities together. This is why Stage Blue is like the foundational community glue. You may argue that it's actually Stage Purple, which is the feminine stage an octave down from Stage Blue. And that would be true too, but to make that point, you'd be going under the heads of most people, right? Because most people, they just don't really... Most people have not lived in like a primitive society, so they don't really see the more fundamental feminine that lies up underneath Stage Blue. But realize that Stage Green is an octave above Stage Blue. So Stage Green is also a collective ego state. It's also a very feminine stage. It's about holding communities together, like universities, like progressive movements. There's got to be a handshake. There's got to be a social glue. And this time, it's not true and false or right and wrong necessarily. It's the good. And notice that Stage Green comes after Stage Orange. So Stage Green is a lot more nasty in a way. Like, they've integrated some nastiness of their shadow in a way that Blue has not. So Blue is just as nasty. All humans are nasty, right? Blue is just as nasty as Green, but Green accepts it in themselves. Like Green will like, you know, think of Bill Maher, right? Bill Maher is a great example of Stage Green, you know. If you watch Club Random, there's a Charlie Kirk video that's actually really good. You can see the difference between blue and green. If you watch that, Club Random, Bill Maher interviewing Charlie Kirk. But he's like smoking weed and drinking alcohol because, see, green follows orange. Orange takes an individual ego perspective. Orange has individual sovereignty in a way that blue does not. Blue will do things, but they'll try to hide it from people, right? They'll hide the fact that they're doing X, Y, or Z. They'll hide their ego away. They'll hide their individuality away. This is why blue likes to fall in line behind a blue leader, like a religious leader, because they're not comfortable being their own leader. They haven't integrated orange. They don't have enough ego. And their leader is the perfect community sort of like pillar for them to rally around, you know, because that person behaves like an individual, albeit to hold that community together, like a priest or an imam, or like a Muslim, I don't know what they call them, but you know, the preacher in a Muslim, you know, context, or even a cult, like a religious cult, right? You can imagine, that role would be filled by somebody who has like just enough like individual integration, but not enough integration to actually be Stage Orange. That's going to be the leader of Stage Blue. And this is why conservatives fall in line. Because they're concerned with the relation, and they're also concerned with following somebody who they think has a clear vision of the truth and what's right and wrong. And what that leader says, it becomes like a fatwa, right? It becomes a like, this is good, this is bad. It's kind of declarations almost, like a rule that comes down from above, and then everybody, it's like a talking point almost, like everybody has to follow this. So conservatives fall in line. Now, why do liberals eat their own? Well, because we're talking about a totally different value system now and a totally different stage on the spiral in terms of development. So stage green has been at stage blue and ideally has also been at stage orange. So stage green, but stage green is also has not been at yellow or at coral. So what I want to do in the last few minutes of this video, we'll talk about stage green, and then we'll talk about stage yellow and stage coral as a fix to kind of the issues with stage green. So stage green eats its own. Why? Because stage green has a dominated mentality. Because it's coming out of orange, and it realizes that most surviving systems are self-interested and full of shit. But what stage green doesn't understand is that also applies to itself. See, it doesn't understand its own ego systemically, and it doesn't understand how ego operates systemically either. So stage green will tend to chop the tall poppy down and then laugh about it, right? They build a whole community not around truth or right and wrong, but about oppressor and oppressed. And the person who is seen to be the masculine kind of ego who wants to be a leader and stand up is seen to be the problem at stage green. So this is why stage green tends to eat its own. Because it's like herding cats. And but I notice a lot of times people pretend to be stage green. They're not actually at stage green. It's actually really difficult to lead stage green for this very reason. Because they don't see ego, collective and individual ego, from a systemic perspective. So what I want to do in the last few minutes of this video is do that. We'll talk about the next stage from green, which is yellow. And then we'll talk about the octave that's above yellow, which is going to be coral. So just give me 1 second. Okay, friends, welcome back. So let me give you a good practical description of yellow in light of everything we've talked about. So stage yellow would look at stage blue and stage green and go, of course, this is how these collective systems are going to operate. This is the structure of these systems. This is the relation within these systems. They're going to operate this way. Don't expect them not to operate this way. The key is to identify what they are and to know that this is the way that they're going to operate. So, the fighting between stage blue and stage green it's as old as time, just like the fighting between stage orange and stage yellow. I mean, think about the fighting between, big corporations and college professors. I mean, that's basically a fight between stage orange and stage yellow. Because stage yellow sees, from a big picture perspective, this understanding that everything operates according to ego. Now, what's the stage that's an octave above yellow, this is controversial because this is my own view, is coral. The difference between yellow and coral is coral sees that there's actually an absolute truth that is not corruptible by ego. And that is consciousness itself. So yes, there is a dream where there are systems of competing with each other to survive, basically, which is yellow's perspective. But that's not the real true reality. The real true reality is consciousness itself, which is truth with a capital T. And I am that consciousness. I am that unchanging consciousness that's not reducible to this kind of changing experience. And that's a great pointer. So what I want to do is I want to leave you guys with that, because that's where spiritual enlightenment contextualizes ego. Yes, you're going to watch ego play itself out and participate in ego playing itself out, but also fundamentally, you're not just ego, right? There's an infinite side to your being as well. And even to identify with one or the other is actually kind of not necessary, right? And this even requires you to get even further up than Coral. But you can watch some of my other videos about that. It has to do with spiritual enlightenment. But so, okay, guys. So you see, reality just is the way that it is. But I would be very careful with a few things, just to leave you guys in conclusion with a few things. Don't ever think that you don't have an ego, because you do in part. Don't ever trust anybody to think that they know better than you do, because they have an ego too. And be careful who you think your friends are. And don't expect people that are not your friends to treat you well. And also realize too that there's something to be said for having a strong ego to become spiritually enlightened. This is something that a lot of people have told me on my path, that it's actually beneficial to have a strong ego to become spiritually enlightened. And why is that? Because you break free from, you have the ability to liberate yourself and to push forward in ways that most people get hung back trying to preserve something, right? You're pushing forward, and they're going to denigrate you, right? They're just like, Stage Green, they're going to cut the tall poppy down. They're going to say, well, that's just ego. You're a narcissist. You're searching, you're seeking. Well, I would say you're not searching and seeking enough, right? And people who aren't searching and seeking enough, they want to live in their little comfort zone. And what they're going to do, instead of create, they're going to chop everybody down, right? That's going to be what they do. It's like all these people are fools trying to chase spiritual enlightenment, or all these people are fools trying to work on themselves. This guy's a fool because he thinks he's a separate self. I mean, that's how it gets, right? You would never think that would happen. But see, like from a Stage Yellow perspective, you would realize that's community glue for some communities, right? For people who don't really, or can't really do much to improve their situation. I mean, it's very tempting to demonize people who have a differing point of view in order to feel like a community. But that's just collective ego. Very Stage Green, sort of. Can also be very Stage Blue too, right? Because green really does require integration of orange. So again, back to my thesis. I'm 4 minutes over my time. But back to my thesis, I think we tend to think that there's a lot more people at Stage Green than there actually are. Like most kids in college campuses, they're not a Stage Green. You don't get to Stage Green until you've integrated Stage Orange. Stage Orange is actually a very complex personal development state. And some have, right? You don't get into a good university unless you're competitive and you work really hard. So, maybe I'm underestimating, because, I went to UCLA. I got in, it's a really competitive school. And I still feel like I didn't really integrate Stage Orange until I got out of college. I was very Stage Green when I was in college, but just because I had family who was at stage orange, but I hadn't done that myself. Like when you actually start a business and you learn what stage orange is all about, you can become stage green for real, right? Not just speaking like some kind of college professor who's got tenure, who can do any or say anything, he's getting that paycheck, or somebody who works for somebody who's just paying them, like when you start your own business, you really learn what stage orange is all about. You learn what sales is about. You learn what relationship-based sales is about, like having clients that you're building relationships with people. That's very stage orange. So to me, I think we tend to overestimate how many people at universities are actually at stage green. Because just because you're competitive in school doesn't mean that you've like thoroughly integrated stage orange. And again, stage orange is all about pragmatism, like what works. Whereas stage yellow, which is an octave above orange, is why does it work? And so you develop a systems thinking mentality, a network theory mentality, and ultimately the ability to learn that each of these stages has its own values and its own lingo, its own language, and its own objectives. And if you want to, you don't have to, and you may not have any choice, right? Because this idea that we have free will is also not necessarily true. If we had free will, everybody would be a millionaire, right? Think about that. If we had free will, everybody would be a millionaire. You would just do the right thing all the time. You'd make your money, and then you would figure out a way to live forever, right? If everybody had free will. So, yeah, you're not always going, just because you have the knowledge to do something doesn't mean that you're going to do it. So just because stage yellow has the knowledge of the tier 1 stages doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect in applying that knowledge all the time. So you have to cut yourself and other people some slack, and this is why you have to move ultimately, if you want to. If you don't, then you don't. But ultimately, if you want to, you have to move into love, which I think the Christians do forecast. We're all sinners. Narcissists are never going to think that they're sinners, okay? People that have a bone to pick, they don't really have anything original to say, but they're just going to shoot everybody else down. They're never going to admit that they're a narcissist. All right, so, but it's useful, like, not all Christianity is at stage blue. There's a lot of Christianity that's actually really high consciousness, especially with regard to love. Right? This idea that we're all sinners, therefore that's the social glue that allows us to love each other even more. That goes beyond stage green even. That goes beyond stage, I would say that goes beyond stage turquoise. Probably moves into teal, I would say. So there's aspects of Christianity that actually are, well beyond tier 1. All right. So don't conflate religion with a specific spiral stage. And don't conflate spiritual enlightenment with a particular spiral stage either. There are spiritual teachers and spiritual communities that are tier 1, that are even like stage purple or stage blue, right? So, you have to actually look at a particular system to see what it is, and kind of have that kind of mentality, which is a stage yellow mentality. Let's make this video a 40-minute video, guys. So just a nice clean number. So in conclusion, I've basically kind of riffed off of my last video where I talked about ego. This video, I moved into explaining why there's a conflict between conservatives and liberals, and kind of pointed it back to the spiral with regard to stage blue and stage green. I've also explained why stage yellow sees through this, but doesn't quite get beyond it. where stage coral sees a truth, finds a truth that actually goes beyond all of this time and space, but then ultimately how you have to keep going instead of camping out on the path, because ultimately there is no resting point. Everything is ultimately undermined. That's why development is an ongoing process as much as it is a stopping point. And that's the paradox. Like, you can stop and rest for a time, but that doesn't mean that you are off the hook for continuing to grow. Your ego might do that as a system, but that doesn't make it right. There's always going to be another system that's going to come in and riff off or recreate what's already been done, whether that's you or whether that's another system. Okay, friends, hopefully this is a good video. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.